Okay, thanks so much for attending. We have about 100 of you signed up, so really appreciate that. Last year was an interesting year for sure. A lot of changes in how marketers are using agencies, a lot of new things in the technology space, a lot of new tools available to agencies to help them improve the way they search for new business. I believe a generally positive feeling about where the industry is and a positive outlook for the year and the years to come. But that said, these changes we're experiencing require agencies to think about their business in a different way. And today I'm going to try and paint a picture of how agencies need to think about their business as they roll through 2018. My name is Mark Sneider. I'm owner, president of RSW US. Started in 2005. We're an outsourced lead generation business development firm for marketing service agencies. That's all we work with exclusively. We work with about 50 agencies across the US, operating as our outsourced sales and marketing firm. We also run a separate agency search business where we run about 2 to 3 searches a year with smaller spend marketers, and it's a great way of informing our outsourced lead generation business. And we just launched a self-service marketing contact list sales offering called RSW Lists. It's at rswlist.com, offering the cleanest marketing contact information in the industry and giving marketing agencies the ability to self-service buy one or thousands of contacts at once. Should be a big help to agencies looking to manage their new business efforts on their own. So let's go ahead and get started. This webinar is based off of the 2018 New Year Outlook survey we recently completed among marketers and agencies. This is our 10th annual New Year Outlook survey. As I think back over the 13 years since starting this business, I can say that there has been one constant in this industry, and that's change. And that's a good thing. Our industry needs to evolve to stay relevant and meaningful to marketers. But just like when the evolution of digital marketing forced agencies to rethink how they manage their business, so do agencies today need to rethink how they operate, how they go to market, how they engage with prospects, and how they work to win new business. Just like the agency that failed to fully embrace digital is now dead or dying, so too is the challenge for agencies today. If you fail to embrace the changes happening all around us, you'll struggle and ultimately fade away. This presentation is intended to outline the makings of a blueprint to help you guide your way through the years ahead. So let's go ahead and get started. What we hope you walk away with today are actionable ideas. I'm a big believer in 2 things, among others. One is that we all need to give away our thinking. It's how we established and built this business. The second thing is never complain without providing a solution. And so I won't be complaining today. I will point out issues and challenges, and I'll offer my perspective on things you can do as an agency to counter some of the forces at play in the market today. The first thing we'll address is how I think your agency needs to operate in order to function properly in today's world. It's not enough anymore to fit every relationship into a modeled bucket. Agencies need to respond differently, react differently, and deliver differently if they're going to maintain relationships long term. We'll also talk about how you need to shape your positioning and how you need to look to the market. As we'll talk later in this webinar, marketers see a lot of sameness in the marketing service agencies that reach out to them, and that's simply because there is. Changes are underfoot that will require agencies to get more specific in defining what they are bringing to the table that's different and worth the marketer's time to sit down and listen to. We'll also talk about how to best approach marketers when you're actively pursuing them, with hundreds of agencies trying to knock down the same door, waiting for the right prospect to come in via an inbound program, or limiting the channels to communicate with prospects, or not pushing it to the fullest in terms of consistency of your outreach is not the recipe for opening up doors and starting conversations. And lastly, we'll talk about how to best win new business. I see hundreds of proposals and presentations on the outsourced agency new business side of our world. And I've sat in just as many final pitch presentations and reviewed RFIs when involved in searches that we've run. I've seen some great stuff and I've seen some not so good stuff. And so today we'll talk a little bit more about what works well and what doesn't when trying to win the pocketbooks of marketers in today's world. So before we dive into what to do, let's talk a bit about what we're dealing with today. Let's talk about the state of today's advertising and marketing industry. The growth of new agencies has and will continue. Every day we learn of a new agency popping up with some specialty, either technical or sector specialty. Some estimate there are over 100,000 agencies of all types and sizes in the US alone. That makes for a very competitive and challenging marketplace. And on the marketer side, we're seeing just the opposite. More companies consolidating, fewer marketers managing businesses. This obviously makes for a very challenging new business environment for agencies. And it also creates a situation where there are fewer referrals out there to be had. And this year, referrals is a source of new business by over 10 percentage points. Many of the agencies that become clients of ours on the agency new business side come in feeling the pinch from a declining referral base. Referrals built their business and sustained their business, but it didn't do them any favors as far as preparing them for the day when the well started running dry. In addition to the challenges already mentioned, agencies are now faced with a growing number of marketers moving some portion of their marketing service in-house. In the agency new business survey we just completed in the fourth quarter of last year, 67% of marketers stated they had moved some agency new business or agency business in-house. This changes the way agencies need to think and act when pursuing new business, when they ultimately engage with a prospective marketer, and how they work to sustain a relationship. And we'll discuss this later on. Another change we're seeing is a desire to hire specialized agencies. 71% of marketers told us in this survey that they are looking for agencies that possess some measure of specialization. This is up significantly from last year, where only 54% of agencies felt the same way. This desire for specialization, whether it's technical or sector specific, requires agencies to think harder about the unique value of what they're bringing to the market. If all you are is a generalist agency with a wide-ranging group of clients, it's going to be harder to get marketers to pay attention and feel like you're really bringing something new and different to the party. As demand on marketers continues to grow to prove out the value of their every dollar spent, marketers are going to be less likely to take chances bringing in an agency that doesn't offer a clear win for their business. This change, marketer sampling, is probably the most dramatic in terms of its implications for agencies and how they operate when pursuing and managing new business. More and more marketers are using project work as a means of sampling agencies. We're seeing it in our surveys, and we're seeing it among the agencies we represent on the agency new business side of our world. Project work is a way for marketers to minimize their risk and enables them to, in essence, conduct a review of different agencies without going all in. We'll talk about the implications for agencies later, but this change in the market affects how agencies need to be looking at potential prospects and how they support projects internally. Putting the C team on a small project and dismissing the prospective client because it's only a project can't be the approach agencies take anymore. And finally, there's one other thing that's happening and has been gradually happening ever since the evolution of digital marketing, and that's the need for marketers and agencies to justify their spends. When digital first came into play, it was all about the creative and the uniqueness of the platform. Today, digital agencies that don't have the ability to provide the analytics and the data, or full service agencies, I'm keeping their marketing clients happy and in good stead with those that those marketing clients report to. In this year's New Year Outlook survey, 87% of marketers said it was important or highly important for their agency to have solid marketing analytics capabilities. This is up from 73% a year prior, rather dramatic jump in the perceived importance of data and analytics. So with all of these changes, particularly with a decline in referral opportunities, comes a need to pursue prospects that are new to your agency, marketers you've never met before that may or may not have an immediate need. This takes a different approach, an approach that requires more of a smart sales mentality. Over the 13 years we've had our outsourced lead gen business, we've seen many agencies approach intro calls and meetings the wrong way, and we've seen many agencies receive a failing grade when it comes to pushing prospects down the line after an initial meeting. I often hear agencies tell me that they're great closers if they can get in front of somebody with a need. Problem is, today, being a great closer isn't enough anymore. A systematic approach to selling is required to win the day, and we'll talk about this more later in the presentation. Okay, let's shift the conversation a bit. We just talked about the state of the industry and what we're seeing firsthand as we manage agency new business relationships for our agency clients, and what we're seeing in the surveys we're conducting of our marketers and agencies. In this year's survey, we decided to probe for the likely challenges facing agencies in 2018 as viewed by both agencies and marketers. For the most part, the two sides lined up, but there are a couple of areas where they differ in magnitude, and this could prove to be an issue if it's not addressed well. So we've already discussed this in the context of the state of the industry and how important it's becoming for agencies to possess effective ROI measurement skills. But what we're finding is that while marketers and agencies think it's important to possess partnerships to support the skills required, the degree of perceived importance and perceived level of skill possessed by agencies seems to be far less aligned. In our New Year Outlook survey, we found that agencies rated the importance of being able to measure ROI at a much lower level than their marketing counterparts. And while agencies don't rate themselves extremely high relative to their effectiveness at performing these tasks, marketers rate them even lower, with only 15% of marketers stating that their agency is effective at measuring ROI. Clearly an area that requires some improvement if an agency expects to win and ultimately sustain a relationship with a marketer long term. And with hundreds, if not thousands, of new technology platforms introduced every year, we know it's hard to stay on top of what's new and relevant to the business of advertising and advancing your client's business. While I don't think one's inability to stay on top of all things in the technology space will undo an agency relationship, staying on top of things can help extend a relationship, particularly if you're bringing to the table, what you're bringing to the table can have actionable and meaningful impact on a client's business. Just bringing along the shiny object because it's shiny isn't going to win the day. And I also believe that while you never want to pin all your hopes and dreams on a new technology, finding something new and different can also prove a good way to open up a conversation with a prospective marketer that you can then parlay into a conversation about other things related to their business. The other challenge facing both marketers and agencies is the procurement of great talent. As technologies advance, as analytics become more important, as organizing your agency to meet the changing needs of marketers becomes a more challenging task, finding great talent, particularly in this low unemployment market, is only going to get tougher. 85% of agencies stated that it is somewhat or very difficult to find great talent. 83% of marketers felt this way too. In our last webinar, we talked about the importance of staying ahead of hiring and to always be looking. And I really can't reinforce the importance of that enough. Something we do here at RSW when looking for great salespeople is stay ahead of the need. You might lose one or two if you find someone and the time isn't right, but I'd rather lose one or two than be in a desperate position to find someone and then ultimately compromise to meet a need, which I'm sure all of you know almost never works out. So while all this might feel a little like quite the uphill battle given all the challenges and the changing state of the industry, there are some things that point to positive outcomes over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. Marketers expect to increase their spending in 2018. And this is certainly good news to see spending expectations on the rise. This is the second year in a row we've seen marketer expectations exceeding agencies' expectations of their own marketing partners. This year, many of our clients finished strong, this year being last year, suggesting that the expectations marketers had leading into 2017 proved out. And hopefully the same will play again as we roll through 2018. And as we look forward to 2020, things continue to point to a positive outlook. A study by Statista indicated that projected revenues for agencies will continue on an upward trend as we roll into 2020. So the trends look good, the expectations appear positive, and the challenges are not insurmountable. They just need to be addressed. Okay, let's start picking apart our issues and addressing the topics we outlined at the start of today's presentation. The first of which is, how do you operate as an agency? In order to survive in today's challenging world, agencies need to be more nimble and agile. They have to be able to respond to changes quickly. The teams inside the agency have to be able to work in a highly integrated manner. Silos simply won't cut it anymore. Marketers need to be able to call on anyone on the team and get answers to questions they have about their program. Quick response times and flexibility is central to meeting the changing needs of marketers in the marketplace. And if you don't have the talents to be great analysts and data providers, go out and find the firm that can do it for you before the marketer goes out and finds it for themselves and brings it in-house. Marketers are bringing work inside because they feel they can do it just as well as their agencies or maybe more affordably. You need to stay ahead of the curve and show your marketing client that you're here to not only deliver great marketing and advertising solutions to their business, but you're also here to find new and better resources to help them move their business forward. And we've talked this one already, but I've seen agencies dedicate people to this activity. At RSW, our Marcom team holds the responsibility of finding new platforms that can help us be more efficient, more creative, and more effective at running our agency new business programs. Having 1 or 2 people in your agency own the process can create some measure of accountability and potentially produce better results. And we'll talk about this next as we discuss how you should look to the market. But as far as how you operate, you need to build your agency around some area of expertise, and then build the talent, marketing and sales, and content platforms around it. Once you define your space, put people in charge of writing about it and speaking about it. Put together practice areas that form the nucleus of the team with the expertise in the area. So when you bring folks into a room to present, they can make that prospective client feel like they aren't just buying an agency, but they're buying a team of consultants that know their agency or know their industry or area of technical expertise. And speaking of which, agencies should never look at an advertising relationship with a client as if they are creative partners. They need to think about themselves as business partners, partners that can bring smart thinking and an intimate knowledge of the client's business. This was reflected in open-ended comments in our most recent survey when asked about challenges facing agencies in 2018. They said things like knowing my market, know our audience, and truly understanding my business, their client's business. I often tell agencies that you all kind of do the same thing, which suggests 2 things. One, there's a big need for greater differentiation, which we'll discuss next. And 2, you have to go beyond just doing. You need to be bringing the ideas, industry intelligence, business acumen to the table to extend the value you bring to the relationship. So with marketers feeling like so many of you look so much alike, and with so many of you trying to knock down the same doors, and with so many of you paying so little attention to your own marketing, you need to step out and make a change to how you look to the market. I just came off of a conference hosted by David Baker. Some of you may know David. He's a pretty outspoken individual with some pretty strong opinions about how agencies need to function. This particular conference was focused on agency positioning. There were about 30 agencies in attendance, and each worked through an exercise that helped them better define their agency's unique point of difference, or at the very least, force them to think about how they would go to market differently if they had no choice but to pick a direction. An interesting exercise indeed. What follows are some of the principles that he shared. As you think about your agency and what you do and what your point of difference is or might be, ask yourself this. Is what you offer in terms of value horizontal, like being an expert in dealer distributor marketing, vertical, like being an expert in insurance and or some other category, or is it both? Think about where most of your experience lies. Think about the possible common threads that can carry across all of the work that you do. I just kicked off with a new client that plays in a good number of categories with deeper experience in 3 of them. They all possess very strong, very strong development bench, back-end development bench that's created some pretty unique platforms that have helped marketers in a variety of business building and market leading ways. So where we will ultimately go with this is some combination of vertical and horizontal, promoting the client's deep experience and ability to deliver on objectives for clients in specific categories, but also selling the horizontal skills of the agency as a way of further differentiating them from other agencies operating in the same vertical space. And I suspect, based on our experience, that this should be pretty well received. One question to ask yourself when you develop your positioning for your agency is it narrow enough or is it too narrow? David created a useful way of visualizing this question that helped the agencies in attendance think about how to best respond. He suggested that if you don't have a minimum of 2,000 companies out there that you can target with your agency's positioning, it might be too narrow. And he also suggested that if all you have is 1 to 2 competitors when you define your positioning, you might not be well defined enough. During the conference, he talked about agencies that focus on industrial marketing complaining that they often lose to general B2B agencies when vying for industrial business. David suggested that what might be happening is marketing prospects may not be seeing enough of a difference between the two, which might be why there aren't many industrial-only agencies in the market today. So think about what you tell a prospect if all you had was 15 seconds to explain who you are and what makes you different. When this webinar is over, do yourself a favor and take 20 minutes and define your positioning on a piece of paper. David invited me and some other industry consultants up there to help provide perspective on the positionings that these agencies were writing at his conference, and happy to do the same for you. Once you work up your positioning, happy to do it on my dime. Just send it my way, and I'll give you my critical perspective on it. So this positioning thing is critical. You have to own a space or a limited number of spaces to play in. We find that the more focused our agency clients are, either vertically or horizontally, the more successful our programs are. And I fully realize that it means you might lose out on opportunities that look at your agency and don't see themselves in your firm's specialty. But in the long run, this is going to be the best way for you to go. And one last point to make: when you define your space, live it and own it. It has to be the first thing a prospect sees when they come to your site. David Baker suggested you need to stand 20 feet away from your homepage, and if you can't figure out what you are and what makes you different, then you haven't gone far enough. Blog about your expertise, embed it in everything you do, the case studies you write, the presentations you give, the proposals you respond to. Prospects need to know that you're expert in the space you've chosen. And if they don't see it everywhere, they're sure to question just how much you're really committed to their category. So let's move on to the next page of the blueprint, which is a tale of how to best approach marketers. This is not a sale for our new list site, but it is a sale for making sure that you start your outreach by smartly defining your sectors based on where you can best leverage your point of difference, then buying lists from resources that are well respected and reputable. The next thing you need to remember is your place in line. You are one of many trying to do the same thing. Get that marketer to pay attention to what you have to say. Marketers tell us in our surveys that they get tons of calls and emails from agencies every day. So if you don't show empathy, show them that you understand what's going on in their space, and you don't have a clearly defined point of difference and value you can bring to that marketer, it's going to be tough to bust through. One of the bigger complaints marketers have about agencies when they first come in contact with them over the phone or face-to-face is that agencies talk way too much. It should be 30-70, you talking, them talking. Any more than that, and it's a problem. Remember, it's all about them. It's not about you, and we'll talk some specifics when it comes to prospecting in just a minute. And as you set yourself up and make those calls and send those emails and leave those voicemails, remember to reinforce your point of difference throughout your connections with the prospect. And like we said before, make sure all your messaging aligns across all your platforms. And because you never know what folks are going to be most receptive to, touch them with as many platforms as possible, including mail. And remember, opening doors takes empathetic, persistent, polite outreach sprinkled with value for the prospect. So your first step when talking with a prospect you really don't know is to ask a lot of smart questions. Think about the industry, the company, the target audience, what talking about their situation. Now that you've gathered all this great information from your prospect in that first meeting or that first call meeting during that first call, they've given you a lot of good information if you're good at gathering info from the prospect. So now it's time to suggest that you'd like to come back and discuss some thoughts on how you can best address their challenges. Set up a time for the call or the second meeting. Don't leave that first meeting without one. Third step, assess the long-term value of the prospect. Now that you've got the second call set, assess the long-term value of that prospect. Is there work behind what might be a first project? Is the brand meaningful enough? Does it bring you into new categories that you've never been in before? Are there other brands in this company's portfolio that might be ripe for the taking? Hopefully you've gathered up information during this first call or first meeting that can help shed some light on the value the prospect holds. Based on what you've learned, this can then guide the degree to which you really drive this one home. Step 4, a viable present initial thinking. So if it appears like it's a viable prospect, present some smart thinking. I'm not talking about presenting creative. I'm talking about presenting initial strategic thoughts on where you can take the prospect. Offer them some choices. So during that second meeting, you can begin to flesh out how aggressive or not they want to be with you. The fifth step is get them nodding and agreeing and set a time to review pricing considerations. So once you present different strategic directions or ideas, get them nodding on one or more possibilities during that second connection and get them agreeing on the ideas or direction proposed. Set a time to review some pricing options. Don't just send them, set a time to review them. Step 6, present pricing options to put them in control. What will hopefully be the final phase, present, again, don't send, pricing considerations for them to review. Tim Williams, an agency industry consultant, follows a pricing theory that is well aligned with the self-determination theory, which basically says that if you give people choices, they're likely to be happier because they feel like they're in greater control. And if they're in greater control, they're significantly more likely to buy something from you. So think about different ways you can get that prospect to commit and work to seal the deal. And if they don't respond right away, don't fret. Stay on them. Marketers tell us that agencies are neither good or bad at follow-up. So there's always room to push that prospect one or two more calls, one or two more email outreaches. Key is staying with them. While they may love you and find your proposal very attractive, they have a million other things on their plate they need to be helped along, so help them. When I started the business back in 2005, I quickly realized just how not good agency principals were in general at moving prospects down the line. All of our new business directors are now not only given incentives when they set meetings for their agency clients, but those incentives go up when you close a certain amount of business, and they're given tenure bonuses when their clients stay on past their contract period, all things that we pay. So they not only have an eye in the short term, which is getting you to the table, but they're also keenly aware of the need to help clients by pushing them and carrying the ball when necessary. Remember, the pipeline is key to success, so keep it full with prospects of varying levels of engagement, and eventually things will start turning for you. And if you stop that, or your new business person inside your agency gets sidetracked with pitches or other agency activities and the pipeline dries up, the opportunities are going to go away. Just remember what I said at the outset about referral opportunities. Just because all looks good today doesn't mean tomorrow will be equally as good of a day. So you have to be proactive, you have to be smart, you have to be present. Okay, so now on to our last topic, how to best win new business. In this section, I'm going to share some of the things I've seen over the past 13 years running our outsourced agency new business program, and over the last 7 years running the agency search business. As I mentioned earlier, I've seen a lot of presentations, proposals, pitches, RFIs. I often provide perspective to existing clients and offer suggestions to help them move forward with better deliverables. I'm told much of what I offer is helpful, so I thought I'd offer some of it here as well today. First thing is to always make it about them. When you write a proposal, start out with a recap of their situation and your perspective on how you can help them. When you present or meet with a prospect, ask them questions about themselves and their business. Don't give them a general, so tell me a little bit about your business, or, hey, what keeps you up at night? Deliver some smart, thoughtful questions that will allow them to see you've done your homework, you know their category, and you're empathetic to their situation. Ultimately, you want to make it as easy as possible for the prospect to digest what you want to give them. And you want to use every opportunity you can to sell without hard selling. So when you introduce case studies in an RFP response, as an example, tell the prospect why you're showing them the case study you're showing them, which should be because it parallels very nicely with their current situation. If you're putting together a proposal or presenting, and part of the presentation or proposal involves spelling out why you're a great fit for the prospect, don't talk in hyperboles. Talk in specifics of what you do that specifically relates to the prospect's world. Make it meaningful and easy for that prospect to relate to the similarities between their situation and your experience. And if you can do this, make them feel like you're already ramping up. This is a great position to be in. If you feel the prospect holds some real promise, put a little extra effort in. Interview some consumers, talk to some dealers, put together a competitive analysis to show the prospect that you're on it and already engaged in their business. This will go a long way with marketing prospects. I've seen it many times on the agency search side of the business be extremely effective. And please, for God's sake, don't be lazy. I've seen what I like to call lazy responses when I review RFIs during searches that I run. Cut and paste jobs, little reference to the client's situation, generic, hyperbole-ridden responses, all very lazy. I like to suggest that if an agency is lazy at this phase of the game, then what happens when the agency is engaged? My guess is the same approach will eventually find its way forward. So take your time and be thoughtful in your response. When you lay out pricing engagement options, if the prospect holds long-term promise, you have to put the effort into it. And assuming they become a client for this one project, you need to get the team rallied to give it their all. The only way you're going to parlay one project into many more later on, or into a full relationship later on, we undoubtedly pay nice dividends if managed appropriately. Third layers we talked earlier. And lastly, you need to treat every day like it's the first day of the relationship. If you and your agency team approach everything you do with an eye on this principle, your relationship with your new marketing client will go a long way forward. So is a radical change required? Do agencies need to change the way they're structured, the way they prospect, the way they try and win and keep new business, the way they support the clients they have? The answer is a resounding yes, which is frankly no different than the yes we said in 2005 when I started the business, the yes we said after the recession in 2008, and the yes we said throughout the start of this decade, and the yes we're going to be saying for generations to come. Agencies aren't going away. They just need to think and operate and be different if they're going to survive and bring value and have a meaningful place in this marketing world we live in and live by. So thank you very much. Hope today you were able to walk away, framing some new thinking in terms of positioning, in terms of how you operate as an agency, in terms of how you approach clients, and ultimately how you win business. I think in the end, it just takes a little bit more effort than maybe some of you are giving. Need some objective perspective to really think about how you're going about approaching marketing prospective clients. Happy to help out and offer some suggestions. Just again, on our dime at any point, just feel free to reach out to me. And there have been some questions that have come in. I'll answer those individually, so I appreciate you sharing those with me. This is being recorded, and so we'll go ahead and push it out to everybody in the next day or two. So thank you so much for attending today, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.